My name is Zara Kensington. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believe stability wasn't something you stumbled into. It was something you built, carefully, quietly, without leaving room for things that could collapse later. That belief shaped everything: my work, my routines, my relationships, especially my judgment. Or at least, I thought it did. I met Ethan Cole about 2 years ago at a networking event I hadn't even planned to attend. A friend dragged me along, promising decent conversation and free wine. I stayed longer than I expected because of him. Ethan was the kind of man people noticed without trying. Not loud, not overly charming, just precise. The way he spoke, the way he watched people. It felt intentional, like he was always measuring something beneath the surface. We didn't talk much that first night, just enough to register each other. The second time, though, was different. We ended up standing near the same group again, and at some point, the conversation drifted into relationships. Someone made a joke about loyalty, something casual, forgettable. Ethan didn't laugh. He took a sip of his drink and said, almost flatly, "All women cheat. It's not even personal. It's just how they're wired." There was something unsettling about how casually he said it, like he wasn't trying to provoke anyone. He was stating a fact. I remember laughing at first. "Wow," I said. "That's a strong take." He glanced at me, just briefly, and shrugged. "You'll see." I should have left it there. I didn't. Over the next few weeks, we kept crossing paths, group dinners, casual meetups, things that felt coincidental until they didn't. Every time, Ethan would drop little comments about his wife, about women in general, how they got bored, how they needed attention, how they always had an exit plan before things even went wrong. And every time he said something like that, he'd look at me. Not directly, not aggressively, just enough to make it feel like I was being included in something, or tested. He told me early on that he was married. Not separated, not complicated. Married. He didn't hide it. If anything, he emphasized it, which somehow made everything feel less dangerous. Because in my mind, someone that open about it wasn't hiding anything. That was the first mistake. The second was answering his messages. It started small. A comment about something we'd talked about. A sarcastic reply. Then longer conversations. Late-night texts that drifted from surface level to personal without either of us pointing it out. He told me his wife, Clara, was distant, that she was always distracted, that she made him feel like an afterthought in his own home. "She's already halfway gone," he said once. "She just hasn't said it out loud yet." I remember hesitating when he said that. There was a pause in the conversation, a moment where I could have stepped back. I didn't. Instead, I asked questions, and he answered them in a way that felt convincing. Too convincing. He said there was no intimacy, no connection, that they barely spoke unless it was logistical, that she accused him of things constantly, of cheating, of being emotionally unavailable. He laughed when he said that part. Projection, he told me. That's what women do. They accuse you of what they're already thinking about. Looking back, that should have been enough. It wasn't. Because somewhere in the middle of all that, I started believing him. Or maybe I just believed the version of the situation that made my involvement easier to justify. 3 months in, we had dinner together. Nothing unusual, just two people talking like we had done dozens of times before. But when we got back to his car, something shifted. The silence stretched longer than it should have. He looked at me like he had already made a decision. And then he kissed me. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't uncertain. It was practiced. I pulled back just enough to say the thing I needed to say. "This isn't," I started. He cut me off gently. "She wouldn't even notice," he said. Not defensive, not guilty, just certain. And that was it. That was the moment I crossed from someone observing a situation into someone inside it. At the time, it didn't feel like losing. It felt like I had been chosen, like I was the exception to everything he believed about women. I didn't realize yet. I was just part of the pattern. The affair settled into a routine faster than I want to admit. That probably says something about me I'm not proud of. It also says something about Ethan, because what unsettled me most, once the initial adrenaline wore off, wasn't the secrecy. It was how efficient he was at it. He had a system. That's the part that still sits wrong in my chest when I think about him now. Not that he was cheating, but that he handled it like project management, clean windows of availability, built-in excuses, backup explanations in case plans changed. He never seemed flustered, never rushed, never conflicted. When Clara was out of town visiting family or attending work events, he suddenly had entire evenings open. When she was home, our meetings got tucked into narrower spaces, before client dinners, after gym sessions, in the gaps between obligations he spoke about with almost mechanical precision. He said it all like he was arranging deliveries. At first, I told myself that calm meant certainty, that if he could move through deception so smoothly, maybe it was because his marriage really had died long before I showed up. But the longer I stayed in it, the more that explanation started to rot. Because Ethan didn't act like a man trapped in an unhappy marriage. He acted like a man enjoying a game he thought he had already won. Anytime I asked whether he felt guilty, he would roll his eyes. About what, he said once, buttoning his shirt in my apartment, like we had just finished discussing the weather. You think women hesitate when they want out? That's not what I asked. He gave me that faint, humorless smile of his. Clara would do the exact same thing if she had the chance. I'm just not naive. There it was again. That same doctrine. Women cheat. Women lie. Women perform innocence better than men do. According to Ethan, he wasn't betraying anyone. He was just getting ahead of the betrayal he was sure would come eventually. And what bothered me more than the words themselves was the conviction underneath them. He didn't say those things like opinions. He said them like universal laws, fixed truths, the kind you could build excuses on forever. There were moments when I pushed back. Small moments. Nothing bold enough to break the arrangement, but enough to test where his certainty came from. One night I mentioned that Clara didn't seem like the villain he described. I had seen pictures by then. Birthday posts, vacation photos, the sort of polished public snapshots that don't prove anything, but also don't scream cruelty. In the comments, she sounded warm, supportive, normal. I remember saying carefully, "She looks happy with you." Ethan's expression changed immediately. Not anger, something colder. You don't know her, he said. I know that. I'm just saying. She's calculated. His voice flattened. Women like her always are. The sweeter they look, the more they're hiding. That should have stopped me, because it didn't sound like knowledge. It sounded like projection, but I ignored that too. Partly because I was still benefiting from his attention. I won't pretend otherwise. Ethan knew exactly how to keep me off balance. If I pulled back even slightly, he would become more attentive, more intense. If I casually mentioned another man from work or said I was busy, he would go quiet for a while, then reappear softer, warmer, more engaged than usual. Once, after I canceled dinner because I genuinely had plans with a friend, he texted me almost an hour later. Interesting how quickly priorities shift. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "You're married, Ethan." His response came immediately. "And yet you're the one canceling on me." I should have heard the warning in that. The entitlement, the absurdity. Instead, I let him pull me back in again, because that was what he was good at. Not seduction, exactly. Control. He kept telling me I was different, smarter than most women, more self-aware, less performative. He knew exactly how to phrase it, so it sounded like admiration, when really it was just another way of isolating me from my own judgment. I thought I was being seen. What was really happening was simpler. I was being managed. Things started to shift around the 6-month mark. Up until then, Ethan had framed everything between us as something temporary but meaningful. Complicated, yes, but moving somewhere. He never promised anything explicitly. That was another one of his talents. He could imply an entire future without ever saying one clear sentence you could hold him to later. Then his language changed. He stopped talking about emotion and started talking about outcomes. The first time I noticed it, we were lying in bed after sleeping together. He was scrolling through his phone, half distracted, and asked me what I thought about prenups. I laughed a little, thinking it was random. That depends. On what? On the people, the money, whether they trust each other. He made a quiet sound in his throat, not really agreement. And what if one person gave years to a marriage and the other person just coasted? I turned toward him. Are you asking hypothetically? Aren't all good questions hypothetical? That answer sat badly with me. After that, the questions kept coming. How did emotional neglect factor into divorce? Did judges care about sacrifice that wasn't financial? What did I think counted as proof that someone had checked out of a marriage? He always asked in that detached, analytical tone, like he was workshopping possibilities. One night, after glancing at something on his phone, he said, almost casually, "If I ever leave, I'm not walking away with nothing. I built that life too." There was nothing emotional in his voice when he said it. No sadness. No regret. Just strategy. That was the moment something inside me shifted, because suddenly I could see it more clearly. I wasn't standing in the middle of some tragic, messy love story. I was standing near a man who was quietly mapping leverage. I asked him directly that night, "Are you ever going to tell Clara about us?" He actually laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not disbelief. Amusement. Why would I do that? I sat up a little. Because she's your wife. She's also not stupid, he said, and I'm not handing her a story she can use against me. A cold feeling moved through me then. What does that mean? It means, he said, finally putting his phone down, if something ends, it ends on my terms. I looked at him for a second too long. That's a strange way to talk about your marriage. He propped himself up on one elbow and gave me a look that felt almost pitying. Zara, everything becomes strategy once trust is gone. You should know that. Maybe I should have left right then. I didn't. Not then. What finally rattled me wasn't one dramatic revelation. It was something smaller. Something almost embarrassingly ordinary. A slip. He called me Clara, not in a fight, not in a tense moment. Just casually, while reaching for his keys and asking if I wanted coffee. The name landed between us so hard it felt like the room changed temperature. He froze for half a second, then corrected himself immediately. Sorry, he said. Long day. But it wasn't the mistake that stayed with me. It was the look on his face after. Not shame, not even discomfort. Irritation. As if my noticing it had inconvenienced him. As if I had made something awkward by reacting normally to being called his wife's name in the middle of an affair. After that, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. He would complain about Clara for an hour, then soften the instant she texted. His whole tone changed. His face changed. He would reply with warmth, heart emojis, domestic details, dinner plans. None of it looked like resentment. It looked practiced. Once, while sitting beside me, he texted her, "Miss you. Don't stay out too late." I saw it because he wasn't even trying to angle the screen away. I remember staring at that message and feeling something ugly rise in my throat. Not jealousy exactly. Recognition. I had believed I was standing in the wreckage of something failing. But what if I had actually walked into something being managed from both sides? Then came the sentence that finally made my stomach drop. We were in his car after dinner, parked outside my building. I don't even remember what we had been talking about before it happened. Something minor, something forgettable. He was smirking about some hypothetical scenario where everything blew up. And I said, "You really think you could talk your way out of this?" He glanced at me and smiled. "If Clara ever found out," he said lightly, "I'd just tell her you manipulated me." I laughed at first because it sounded so outrageous. He didn't. He was still smiling. I felt my own expression change. "What?" He shrugged. "Relax, I'm kidding." But he wasn't. I knew he wasn't. There was too much ease in the way he said it. Too much readiness. Like the sentence had existed before that moment and simply slipped out ahead of schedule. I looked at him carefully. "That's not funny." His jaw shifted slightly. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "You are." He leaned back in his seat, suddenly bored. "Zara, if this ever gets messy, everyone protects themselves. That's how life works." There it was. No apology. No reassurance. Just a principle. A quiet confession wrapped in cynicism. And in that moment, for the first time, I saw the shape of the danger clearly. It wasn't just that Ethan was cheating. It was that he had already imagined the version of events he would tell if he needed to survive exposure. A version where I became useful damage. A version where he stayed in control. I went upstairs that night and didn't sleep much. I kept replaying his tone, the smile, the casual way he positioned me as a liability he could sacrifice later. By morning, something inside me had hardened, not into courage, not yet, but into attention. After that, I didn't pull away dramatically. I didn't confront him. I didn't make threats or declarations. I just started watching him. And once I did, I couldn't stop seeing the pattern. After that night, I didn't end things. Not immediately. I wish I could say I walked away the moment I understood what Ethan was capable of, that I drew a clean line and stepped back with clarity and self-respect. I didn't. I stayed. Just differently. Quieter. More aware. I stopped reacting the way he expected me to. I answered messages, but not right away. I agreed to meet, but less often. I asked fewer questions. Shared less about myself. I started observing instead of participating. Ethan noticed almost immediately. He always did. The first night I didn't reply for a few hours. He sent a second message. Busy. I didn't answer. The next morning, there was another one. Disappearing isn't a great look, Zara. By that evening, it shifted. Are you seeing someone else? I stared at my phone when I read that. The irony was almost absurd. I typed a response, then deleted it, then typed again. No, just busy. He replied within seconds. You don't seem like someone who gets busy without warning. There it was again. Control disguised as concern. I didn't engage further. That seemed to bother him more than any argument could have. Over the next few days, his tone shifted in small but noticeable ways. Slightly sharper comments. Subtle digs about consistency, about loyalty. Once, when I declined to meet because I already had plans, he replied, "Interesting how priorities change when people get comfortable." I almost laughed, but I didn't, because something about the way he said it felt less like insecurity and more like pressure, like he was trying to push me back into a position he understood, a position where I responded, where I explained myself, where I gave him control again. I didn't, and that's when things began to feel unstable, not chaotic, tense. Like something underneath the surface had started shifting, even if neither of us acknowledged it directly. One night, he was venting again about Clara. That hadn't changed. "She asked me why I've been distracted lately," he said, pacing slightly in my kitchen. "It's irritating." I leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Why is that irritating?" "Because now she's paying attention," he said. "Cooking dinner, asking about my day, trying to fix things." I watched him carefully. "That sounds like effort." He gave a short, dismissive laugh. "It's performative." "Or maybe she actually cares," I said, before I could stop myself. His eyes flicked toward me, sharp. "You're starting to sound like her." I held his gaze. "I'm just saying, it doesn't sound like she's checked out." He went quiet for a second, then his voice flattened. "You don't know what she's like." That sentence again, always the same, always final. I let it drop. But something inside me didn't, because for the first time I wasn't just hearing his version of things. I was comparing it against his actions, against the small glimpses I had seen, against the fact that every time Clara moved closer, he framed it as a problem. And every time she pulled away, he used it as justification. There was no version of her behavior that didn't serve his narrative. That realization sat in the back of my mind like something waiting to be acknowledged. And then, about a week later, everything broke open. It was a Tuesday evening. I remember that clearly because I was halfway through making dinner. Something simple, pasta. The kind of meal you make when you want your hands busy so your mind doesn't spiral. My phone lit up on the counter. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. I picked up without thinking. "Hello?" There was a brief pause. Then a woman's voice. Calm, even. "Hi, is this Zara?" Something in my chest tightened instantly. "Yes," I said slowly. "My name is Clara." Everything inside me went still. She didn't rush, didn't raise her voice, didn't accuse. "I believe you know my husband," she said. There was no anger in her tone, no tremor, just certainty. For a split second, every instinct I had screamed to deny it, to follow the script Ethan had already placed in my hands. "If anything ever happens, I'll say you manipulated me." The words flashed through my mind so clearly it felt like they were happening again. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Clara spoke again before I could decide. "I'm not calling to argue," she said. "I just want the truth." I swallowed. My grip on the phone tightened. "What truth?" I asked, though I already knew. "I've seen messages," she said. "Not everything, but enough." Messages. Proof. Not suspicion. Not guesses. Proof. That changed everything. "What do you want from me?" I asked quietly. There was a brief pause on the other end. "I want to understand how long it's been happening," she said, "and whether he told you anything about me that I should hear directly." That phrasing caught me off guard. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't desperate. It was measured, like she was gathering information, not reacting to betrayal. I closed my eyes for a second, and then I made a decision. Not a heroic one, not even a clean one, just a different one. I told her the truth. 6 months. I told her what Ethan had said about their marriage, that they were basically roommates, that he believed she was cheating, that she was distant, cold, uninvested. There was silence on the other end. Not shock, not denial, just silence. Then Clara exhaled slowly. "We've been in couples therapy for 4 months," she said. The words landed like something heavy dropping into place. "What?" He told you I was distant," she continued. "We started therapy because I asked him to be more present. I rearranged my schedule. He rearranged his travel." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. "I gave him full access to my phone," she added. "Emails, messages, everything. He never asked to see it." My stomach twisted. That doesn't match what he told me," I said, my voice barely steady. "I assumed it wouldn't," she replied calmly. There was no bitterness in her tone. No anger. Just quiet understanding. That was the moment the story Ethan had built started to collapse completely. Not crack. Collapse. Because what Clara was describing didn't align with anything I had been told. It wasn't even close. "I'm sorry," I said, the words coming out before I could filter them. "For what?" she asked gently. "For believing him." There was a pause. Then, quietly, "You weren't the only one." That hit harder than anything else she had said, because in that moment it stopped being a triangle. It became something else. 2 people, looking at the same man from different sides of a lie. We spoke for almost an hour. comparing timelines. Details, small things that, on their own, meant nothing, but together painted something disturbingly precise. When he told me she was distant, he had just come back from therapy with her. When he told her he was working late, he was with me. There was no chaos in it, no emotional mess. It was structured, intentional, engineered. At some point, I realized something strange. I didn't feel like I was talking to my rival. I felt like I was talking to someone who had been standing in the same storm, just on the other side of it. Clara didn't ask me to confront him, didn't suggest revenge. She just said one thing. I don't want this to turn into a story he can control, she said. If we do anything, it needs to be clear, documented, undeniable. I understood immediately, because I had already seen how easily Ethan could rewrite reality. If he thinks he can blame me, I said slowly, then I need protection too. You do, she agreed. There was another pause. Then she added, almost thoughtfully, he cares about appearances more than anything. Control, optics. I let out a quiet breath. Yes, I said. Everything with him is about narrative. We didn't say it out loud right away, but the idea started forming. Not emotional, not reactive. Strategic, just like him. Except this time, he wouldn't be the one controlling it. After that call, I didn't reach out to Ethan. Not to argue, not to explain, not even to end things properly. I just stepped back, and the silence did exactly what I expected it to do. It unsettled him. The first night, he sent a casual message. You busy? I didn't respond. The next morning, it turned sharper. Ignoring me now? By that evening, it escalated. If you're done, at least say it. I read every message, didn't answer a single one. Because for the first time since meeting him, I wasn't reacting to him anymore. I was watching. 2 days later, I sent one message. Short, clean, final. I know the truth about Clara. I spoke to her. I'm done. The reply came almost instantly. That's exactly what she wanted. She's manipulating you. I didn't respond. Then another. You really think she's innocent? And another. You're overreacting. Then the tone shifted. You're making a mistake. Then sharper. After everything I told you? Then colder. Don't be naive, Zara. I read them all. And for the first time, none of it reached me. Because once you see the pattern clearly, it stops working. I blocked his number that night. Social media, email, everything. No explanation. No argument. Just removal. It wasn't emotional. It was preventative. Because I remembered exactly what he had said in that car. If Clara ever found out, I'd just tell her you manipulated me. I wasn't giving him access to build that version of me. Clara and I didn't rush anything after that. We didn't confront him immediately. We didn't explode the situation. We built it, carefully, deliberately, the same way he had built his lies. Except ours was based on truth, documentation, timing. Clara told me his birthday was coming up in a week. Small dinner, at their house. Close friends, a few coworkers. Curated, controlled. Of course it was. He'll want everything to look perfect, she said over the phone one evening. He always does. I could hear the quiet certainty in her voice now. Not the uncertainty of someone questioning her reality anymore. Clarity. What's the plan? I asked. There was a pause. Then she said, no scene. I waited. No argument. No shouting. No space for him to twist it. That made sense. Because Ethan thrived in chaos. In confusion. In moments where emotion could be redirected. So what does that leave? I asked. Evidence, she said simply. And witnesses. The idea wasn't dramatic. It wasn't revenge. It was containment. Clara had already spoken to a lawyer, quietly, weeks before she called me. That part didn't surprise me anymore. She had been watching too, preparing, just like he had. The divorce papers were ready, filed, signed, notarized. All that remained was delivery. There's one clean way to do it, she said. I listened, carefully. The cake, she said. At first, I thought she meant symbolism. I was wrong. The cake was real, ordered from a bakery he liked. Prepared exactly the way he expected. Except underneath the removable cake board, there would be an envelope. Sealed. Official. Unavoidable. He opens it in front of everyone, I asked. No, she said calmly. I hand it to him. That detail mattered. Control of the moment. No theatrics. No ambush energy. Just presentation. He won't be able to rewrite it, she added. Not with witnesses. Not with documents. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. And me? I asked. You don't come, she said immediately. That surprised me. You've already done your part, she continued. You told the truth. That's enough. She was right. My role wasn't to expose him publicly. It was to step out of the story he had tried to write for me. On the day of the dinner, I stayed home. Phone on silent. No distractions. No checking in. No second guessing. I had already said everything that needed to be said. Around 8 that evening, my phone lit up. A message from Clara. One word. Delivered. I stared at it for a long time, not because I needed more details, but because I understood exactly what that word meant. It meant it was done. About an hour later, my phone exploded. Unknown number, then another, then another. I didn't need to guess. Ethan. I let the calls go. Then the messages started. Zara, what did you do? Followed by, you went behind my back? Then, you actually think she's telling the truth? I didn't respond. The messages came faster. Accusations, anger, then denial. This isn't what it looks like. Then blame. You twisted everything I told you. Then, almost predictably, narrative. You manipulated me when I was vulnerable. I actually laughed at that one. Not because it was funny, because it was exactly what he said he would do. Right on schedule. Within minutes, he had rewritten 6 months of reality into a version where he was the victim, where I had taken advantage of him, where Clara had orchestrated everything, where he was caught between two manipulative women. It was almost impressive, if it hadn't been so transparent. There were over 30 messages, some angry, some pleading, some offering a version where we could fix this if I just admitted I panicked. Not once. Not once. Did he acknowledge what he had done? That was the part that made everything feel final. I opened the message thread, scrolled all the way down, and typed one last reply. I spoke to Clara before tonight. I've seen everything. I'm not part of your story anymore. I stared at the screen for a second, then hit send, and blocked the number again. No argument, no explanation, no space. Within minutes, another call came through. Private number. I declined. Blocked unknown callers, then an email. Different address, same tone, same shifting blame. I didn't read it twice. I forwarded it to Clara, then filtered everything else straight to spam. That was it. No goodbye, no closure conversation, nothing left for him to work with. Later that night, Clara sent one more message. He tried to say it was public humiliation. I waited. There was a second message. No one reacted. They just watched. I could picture it. The room. The silence. The moment his control slipped. Not because someone attacked him, but because no one gave him space to perform. She added one more line. He left halfway through reading it. I set my phone down after that. And for the first time in months, everything felt quiet. Not empty. Clear. The aftermath wasn't loud. No dramatic fallout. No public spectacle. Just consequences. Clara moved forward with the divorce immediately. No negotiations. No attempts to reconcile. She had already done months of trying. This was just the conclusion. Ethan tried to reshape the story. Of course he did. He told mutual friends that Clara was controlling, that I had pressured him, that everything had been misunderstood. But stories don't hold up well against evidence. There were messages, timelines, therapy records, and witnesses. That was the part he never planned for. He assumed no one would compare notes. A few weeks later, Clara and I met in person. Neutral place. Coffee in the middle of the afternoon. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't awkward. Just steady. We didn't go over every detail again. We didn't need to. At one point, she said something that stayed with me. I don't think he actually believes all women cheat, she said, stirring her coffee slowly. I looked at her. Then why say it? I asked. She met my eyes. Because if all women are guilty by default, she said quietly, then he never has to be wrong. That made more sense than anything he had ever told me, because it explained everything. The certainty, the accusations, the preemptive betrayal. It wasn't belief. It was protection. For him, I won't pretend I came out of this clean. I didn't. I made a choice to stay when I should have walked away earlier. I justified things I shouldn't have. That part is mine. But I also didn't stay once I understood the full picture. I didn't let it drag on. I didn't let him turn me into something useful in his version of events. Blocking him wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. The cleanest decision I made in the entire situation. Last I heard, he moved to another city. New job. New environment. Probably a new story. As for Clara and me, we're not bonded by anything sentimental. No shared trauma speeches. No forced friendship. Just mutual clarity. Two people who compared timelines and refused to stay inside someone else's script. If there's anything I took from all of this, it's simple. When someone insists that everyone else is guilty by nature, pay attention. Because sometimes that's not an observation, it's a confession.